Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. Have a great guest that I think everyone's going to enjoy. It's Joel Berry. He's the managing editor over at the Babylon B, sorry. Babylon thing, close enough. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a whole lot I want to get into. Want to talk about, of course, comedy. Want to talk about kind of the role the bee played and kind of all this Twitter stuff that's going on, and maybe a little bit about kind of progressive Christianity and why you always seem to be sparring with these guys
Oh,
online.
all right. Let's
um,
get into it.
but let's start from the beginning. Joel, how did you get started? Because I get the idea that you didn't really come from like some kind of stand-up comedy background.
No, definitely not. I'm not classically trained in comedy whatsoever. Um, gosh, well, I guess my job before this was in supply chain logistics. I sold supply chain services to manufacturing corporations in the Midwest. So that was my comedic training, I guess. Um, Obviously, a very atypical path into writing satire. But the funny thing is that, I'm pretty typical of all of the Babylon Bee writers on our staff. I mean, we're all just kind of regular Joes. Um, we have normal jobs, normal families. We're all kind of the people that would be passed over by the typical comedy world probably, but who have some natural talent, a knack for this kind of stuff, and the Bee is an outlet that platforms the kind of satire, the kind of messages, the kind of comedy that you won't find elsewhere. So we kind of found our home here, and it's been a blast. I've been doing this for 3 years, and it is wonderful to finally be doing what you really feel you were meant to be doing all along. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that you come from that different background because I feel like that's what makes the Bee so unique. Like you said, it's just that comedy that you don't get anywhere else. I mean, a lot of people, if you told the average person that the funniest site on the internet would be kind of some, conservative Christian site making in jokes about Veggie Tales, I don't think that would make a lot of sense to people. But you guys have been slaying people like the Onion for years, so it's pretty easy to know now, right?
Well, yeah, I think I think there's something about having a bunch of guys writing comedy who are living in the real world, who are who work regular jobs and live normal lives the way most people live their lives, as opposed to maybe living in Manhattan, writing for the Harvard Lampoon, things like that. I think it gives our writing that sense of relatability that a lot of people kind of see themselves and the way they think in what we write, in a way that you just don't see often. That was my initial attraction to the Bee. I started myself as a fan. I remember finding them on Facebook early on, like 2016, summer of 2016, something like that, and coming across the headline. It was Holy Spirit unable to move through congregation after the fog machine breaks, and I thought, like, who are these guys? This is amazing. And it was kind of, I think, for a lot of people, it was their first time encountering something funny, something witty that didn't hold Christians or the Christian right in contempt, or tried to joke about them in a way that didn't understand them. We could make fun of Christian culture from a place of love and affection, and people really latched onto that, including myself. So that was kind of our superpower early on, and then, as you know, 2016, that's when Trump was elected, and Trump was kind of our foil. He gave us so much material for 4 years. It was sad to see him go. We had to we had to move on from Trump, but I think that was kind of our second stage with the Babylon Bee, was that we could make fun of Trump in a way that wasn't kind of like deranged and hateful and angry. We could do it in kind of a more good natured way. We could joke about a lot of the stuff that our culture was forbidden from joking about, with the George Floyd riots and the Black Lives Matter movement, gender ideology, all this stuff, all this kind of low hanging fruit that I think you're seeing comedians just now starting to come around to, and it maybe just now kind of like dig at these movements a little bit. The Bee was back there 4 years ago joking about this stuff when it was completely culturally impermissible. So So I think that was really kind of our shot in the arm over those 4 years.
Yeah, I think, I hadn't thought about it enough, but I think it's kind of obvious why you guys can make fun of, say, gender ideology and other people can't, right? Like these humorless people, it is their religion, right? But
Yeah.
at least you can actually point to funny parts about your religion and do it in a good hearted way, but they can't, look at it at all. But Trump is a really interesting point because most like most late night talk show comedians got way less funny during Trump,
Yeah.
which is interesting because he should have given them infinite material like he did for you guys. But instead, all they could do is basically turn into after school specials, right? They just were
Yeah.
giving an altar call in every single one of their late night bits.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and it's a shame because a lot of these guys we've seen them be brilliant before. I know Colbert at one time was funny. I mean, his satire of a right wing talk show was brilliant. Same for a lot of these guys, but they kind of got this idea, the way I think a lot of the media got the idea at the time that Trump was so dangerous, he was such an existential threat to our democracy that comedy, fun, good-natured humor, all that had to take a back seat, and they now had to use their platforms to get this guy, to bring this guy down. That kind of like this very self-serious, they kind of fancied themselves as the warriors protecting democracy, and that just made them so much more ridiculous, and it opened the game up for people like us to come along and joke about the stuff that no one else was joking about, and also to kind of make fun of all the people that were just taking things so seriously during what was like literally the funniest presidency in American history.
Yeah,
I mean,
just objectively, right?
just objectively, I don't care what side you were on. I mean, there was
Yeah.
so much that was funny about it, so much that was absurd about it. And I think, the other thing that I think really helped us too during that time was, our Christian worldview. We start with this like this very basic, assumption that all human beings have this fundamental flaw. We have original sin, which means that we're all prone to pride and ridiculousness and silliness. And I think that kind of shared sense that we're all in the same boat. It's not so much an us versus them as it is like a we problem. This is a humanity problem, and like you can kind of look at just the insanity of human beings trying to, be their own gods, create a new morality from scratch. There's something that's just very kind of silly about it when you sit back and watch it all. And it's just, I don't know, it's just fun. There's too much silliness in the world to not be laughing every day.
Well, one of the most amazing things, of course, is kind of the role that the Babylon Bee has played in this unfolding saga of kind of Twitter here. And I wanted
Yeah.
to kind of pick your brain about this because that's why I named this episode the Babylon Bee effect, right? Because I'm sure you're familiar with the Streisand effect. And
Yeah.
and the whole idea is the more you try to shut it up, the bigger it gets, right? And I
Uh-huh.
love that, like, the Babylon Bee being censored in a weird, indirect way feels like it completely like shattered a regime of lies that was being used to manipulate people, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts on like what was. I guess let's go back to kind of maybe a little beginning of this process. So the
Yeah.
Babylon Bee gets banned for naming the Admiral Levine the man of the year, right? Like that's how it gets
Yeah.
banned off of Twitter, right?
Uh-huh.
What and you guys refused to remove this, right? So what was the thought process behind that? Like when you find out you're banned and why you won't remove it and that kind of thing. What's going on kind of in the office there?
Yeah. Oh boy. That was a crazy couple of days. So I remember. So I'm the one who wrote that silly joke,
Nice.
and it was one of those days where it was kind of a slow news day. Things were kind of quiet. There wasn't a lot of engagement on the site that day, I feel like, and we had just read in the news that USA Today had named Rachel Levine one of their Women of the Year, and so I wrote this thing as it's not even a joke as so much as it is like a troll. It's like it's almost just like it's just something mischievous to put out there. I felt like kind of making some noise and stirring up the hornet's nest a little bit, and so I threw it out there, and Kyle, our editor in chief, calls me a few hours later, and he's like, "Dude, I think you're going to get us kicked off Twitter." And sure enough, I think I want to say it was like the next day or 2 days after that, we were suspended, or like we were locked out of our Twitter account, on the condition that and we could come back on the condition that we delete the tweet and then check a box saying that we acknowledge we have engaged in hateful conduct and we won't do it again, kind of a thing. And so, this is the point where I have to give full credit to our owner, Seth Dillon. I mean, that was where I was kind of like, okay, well, we need our platform. We can't be off of Twitter. Let's delete the tweet. We'll turn it into a joke. We'll come back. We'll make it really funny. We'll kind of have a wry dig in there at the whole system, and we'll keep posting. It'll be fine. And Seth was like, immediately, like, didn't even blink. Dude was just like, we're not deleting the tweet. He immediately announced on Twitter that we weren't going to delete the tweet. So there we were painted into a corner there. And he took that stand from day one, from the first minute. And I think it was one of those things that, I mean, it could have gone very bad. I mean, it could have gone poorly for us. There was it was no sure thing that this was going to turn out the way things have turned out. But I really credit Seth with taking that stand. And I think, I think that his is an example of what can happen if more people take these kinds of stands. We make these tiny little compromises all the time, whether it's to keep our platform, whether it's to not stir up trouble, whatever it is. And that is the way this kind of, this new religion, this woke cultural movement is allowed to go on unopposed, because we don't oppose it. So, luckily we knew a certain multi-billionaire who likes the Babylon Bee. And he at one point gave us a phone call, and I think he was opening up his factory in Germany at the time, his Tesla factory, and he hadn't really heard what had gone on, but he kind of came back to the States. He booted up his Twitter, couldn't find the Babylon Bee, and called us and was like, "What happened? What happened to you guys?" And we told him, and that's the point when he kind of said, maybe I should just buy Twitter, is what he said to our editor-in-chief, Kyle Mann. And I think the next day he put out that Twitter poll that said, do you think that Twitter abides by the spirit of free speech, or whatever that poll was, you might remember. And a lot of people responded no, and that kind of got the ball rolling. So I don't think that the Bee was by any means like the sole catalyst. I think there was a lot going on that was frustrating him at the time that led him to do this. But thank God for him. God works in mysterious ways. And here we are back on Twitter. A lot of important voices in our national discourses are now back on Twitter. And it's wonderful to see. I'm still pinching myself. Sometimes I imagine that I'm going to wake up, in November 2016 and be told that this is all a dream, and I'm still in supply chain logistics and Hillary's president. But here we are. I like this timeline.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel. I'm going to hold on to the idea that the Babylon Bee was the catalyst for this, because that is just the funniest
Yes.
story. I don't care what the actual story is. That is the story going forward, just to be clear.
I think so. Like, the old Western, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. That needs to be the legend that is printed.
Yeah, you guys need to take full credit for this. I won't have you doing anything else. But it is really fascinating, right? Because whether or not it's the entire catalyst for it, the absurdity of banning a satire site for wrongthink by saying something that is very true and very obvious really makes it clear kind of where we're at and what it takes, this constant omnipresent censorship that is required to kind of hold the worldview, the ridiculous progressive worldview that kind of dominates us all in place, right? Like, when all of this stuff comes out and you see some of the background of like why people are getting banned off of Twitter and how things are getting manipulated, how they're absolutely just changing the rules on the fly to target people like yourselves just because of your political viewpoint or political outlook. Possibly, it's not even a political outlook. It's just a basic observation about reality.
Yeah.
What do you think about the ability of comedy to kind of break that that constant stream of propaganda when you see a guy like Elon take action because of something that possibly, at least related to you guys in a decent way? How do you think that kind of the fact that absurdity then triggers a far more important investigation into how the government is interacting with Twitter and shaping politics and pushing people up? Is it kind of humbling to kind of be a part of that process in some way?
Yeah, I mean, it really, really is. And I think in our case, this just happened to be the avenue. I think that God used. It could, if it wouldn't have been us, it would have been someone else. I think. I think the thing about comedy that makes it so powerful, especially right now, is this sense that laughter is involuntary. And usually it's involuntary, and when you laugh at a joke because of that nugget of truth that's in it, you're acknowledging something that is true about the world. And what we found over the last 4 years with people who laugh at our jokes, and we get feedback from from the left, from people who are atheists, from people who are maybe left of center, who still think our stuff is funny, and because they see that nugget of truth in there. I think there's something powerful in that, in a way that kind of strikes fear into the heart of, like you said, there's this worldview that it's really a house of cards. It's held together by tape and like the slightest amount of ridicule or questioning, and it all comes down. I mean, they can't abide any kind of ridicule because their worldview is built on nothing. It's built on lies. And so I think the reason that the left came after us so hard, I mean, I think for a lot of people from the outside, it looks so ridiculous. Why are they censoring comedians? It's ridiculous. But I think the left knows full well, and they have for a long time, how powerful mockery and ridicule is. It goes, I mean, back to Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. That was one of his rules, was that ridicule is one of your most powerful weapons against your enemy. It's very hard to oppose. It's very hard to recover from, and the left has been using it very skillfully for decades. I mean, I've heard interviews of like the early SNL comedians, in the 70s and 80s, when they kind of first realized that they could actually move the needle of a national election by, caricaturing a Republican who is running and just making them look like a fool, and they, most recently, we saw it with SNL and Sarah Palin. I mean, Sarah Palin, I remember the first speech I heard Sarah Palin give at the Republican National Convention. She gave her speech about how she sold her private jet on eBay and all that. And I was in college at the time, and I was rooming with he was a liberal guy, a leftist that I roomed with, and he watched the speech with me, and he said, "That is the best political speech that I've ever seen." Speaking of Sarah Palin. Well, how do we remember Sarah Palin today? We remember her as the lady who could see Russia from her house, with the ridiculous, Fargo sounding accent that Tina Fey did. It's very powerful, and obviously our main goal isn't to influence national elections and, character assassinate people. We're trying to tell the truth in our own way. And I think that's where the battle is right now. It's over the truth. It's over, do words have meaning? And so I think that's why our jokes have become kind of such a lightning rod for our culture, because that's where the fight is.
Well, and it's interesting because another, one person who we know got targeted by Twitter for specific removal was Libs of TikTok, which I believe Seth Dillon, he helped the owner of that account end up kind of creating a career out of that, right? I think helped set that up.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Seth is kind of he's a a tech mogul. He's got his hands in all
Mhm.
kinds of things. People think of him as the Babylon Bee guy, but he's doing lots of stuff.
But it's interesting that both of you, Libs of TikTok is just showing what people are saying, right? It's no
Yeah.
commentary, it's no additional content. You most of the time, it's just a reflection of reality, right? And
Uh-huh.
in the same way, that's what you guys got banned for as well, right? Both of you in those cases, obviously, you guys have a little more editorializing because you're making jokes around it. But in both cases, you were removed for the crime of just pointing out the obvious, and that seems
Hmm.
like the most dangerous thing for them is just this simple thing. Like you said, the left has been so good at using the power of comedy to kind of shame people about noticing obvious things,
Yes.
right? And it started as comedy. That's the interesting thing. It started as comedy, it started as mockery, it started as kind of coding these things as low class and ignorant and behind the times. But
Uh-huh.
as we've gotten closer to kind of the progressives having the cultural hegemony, the cultural control, they've lost kind of the mocking ability, right? They can't do it anymore. They've lost that,
Yes.
and instead, all they have left is this strict hectoring of people and this censorship, screaming, "The emperor obviously has clothes," and you
Hmm.
guys are just kind of showing that's obviously not true, and those are the things that get you completely banned.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that makes this kind of funny and ironic is that I came from very strict religious fundamentalism. I mean, very hardcore fundamentalism. Like like you had the outsider, and you had the people that you weren't supposed to talk to, and the music that you weren't supposed to listen to, and um, I think growing up in that world, I think gave me a very very deep understanding that you know of this world of the left, and kind of how they see themselves, because it is a new religious movement. It operates in a lot of the same ways religious fundamentalism does, and I was always kind of a snarky, kind of disrespectful kid. I was always like the one making fun of our whatever church leadership, or I was always getting in trouble for all that kind of stuff. So I this is always kind of a natural transition to grow up, and then suddenly I think the Christians are the outsiders. They've lost the cultural hegemony, and now you kind of have this new movement and worldview that is operating in very much the same way as a religious movement, just with different ideals. And so I can kind of look at it from the outside and know exactly how these people think, and how they operate, and I think that makes us really effective.
Why do you think it was so easy to kind of shame not just Christians, but people of kind of all stripes who had a more classic traditional understanding of morality and kind of norms and traditions? Why do you think it was so easy for the media to kind of use comedy and mockery and dismissal to make people ignore really fundamental and obvious truths
Hmm.
about kind of the world around them?
That's a good question. I think that a lot of it has to do with the same reason the left is ripe for mockery now, and that is like self righteousness and self seriousness. And I think a lot of the mockery that Christians have endured in the past, um, is well earned. I mean, we sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. Sometimes we're afraid of questioning. You know, sometimes we act very self-righteously, um, and so I think, and sometimes we're afraid to laugh too. Christians have kind of earned this reputation for being very dour, uh, sour people, and I don't say that all of that is earned, of course, but I think um, you know, being able to laugh a little bit at your own culture, at yourself, um, and being more open about your imperfections and your sins and your failures, it makes you much more mockery proof. Because you're kind of you're taking the wind out of the sails of anyone who might make fun of you, because you're already well aware of your shortcomings, and you're not afraid of them, and you're open about them. And so I think um, if Christians can keep doing that, being confident in the truth, confident in what's right, not wavering in that, while at the same time, being willing to laugh at ourselves and some of our own ridiculousness, I think, yeah, it makes us a lot harder to make fun of.
So I agree with a lot of that. I think there's a lot of truth in pieces of that, but I do wonder if one of the issues is kind of the loss of the idea of the sacred, right?
Yeah,
Like there
yeah,
are areas that you simply can't give in on, right? That you can't
yes,
discuss. There are hard lines in the sand. And I think while it is important for Christians to like be winsome, make, be able to take a joke, that kind of thing. I think one of the problems, and maybe this will transition us that into some things I've seen you back and forth with people on Twitter about, is so often it feels like Christians are actually really willing to cede extremely important ground because they don't take these things seriously enough. The
mm,
things they take seriously are their public reputation and whether or not
yes.
they get glowing, articles, or whether they'll take heat from important people, and not so much, where I'm going to draw the line on really important issues that are kind of fundamental to my faith and the well-being of the people around me.
Hmm. Oh, I think there's absolutely something to that. And I think that there is a time for seriousness. I mean, the Babylon Bee. I mean, comedians are supposed to have no sacred cows, right? Well, that's a lie. I mean, leftist comedians, they have their sacred
Yeah,
cows, but the
that's right.
Babylon Bee, we have our sacred cows too. I mean, there are certain things that we will not, certain ways in which we will not cross the line. We won't, blaspheme. We won't make fun of, our God and the things that we hold to be holy. Um, and I think that, I, I think maybe Christians have kind of gotten it backwards in the past as to what they should be taking seriously, and
Hmm.
maybe we shouldn't be taking our image so seriously as we take the truth.
Yeah.
Taking the truth seriously is going to get us, uh, you know, mocked and ridiculed and dragged through the mud, in a lot of ways. Um, uh, but we should never cross into taking ourselves seriously.
So, and feel free, because I know you guys are not primarily political, so don't feel like you need to if they're part of this question that you want to move around, don't worry about it. But
Yeah.
one thing that again I see you kind of interacting a lot with is kind of progressive Christianity, and I've got a saying that I like to throw out there. Progressivism will gut your religion and wear it like its skin like a trophy.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel like I see that a lot
Yeah.
online, even from people who make beloved children's entertainment, that
Mm.
enjoyed by Christian children the world around.
Uh,
And so I kind of wanted to ask you, as somebody who does work in the area of comedy, and so you do understand the, like you said, the need for levity and the ability to not take
yeah.
everything too seriously, but at the same time, it seems like what is it about Christianity that seems to make it kind of susceptible, or at least a certain brand of Christianity, very susceptible to kind of this progressive zeitgeist? Why are people so
Mm.
desperate to kind of follow it in kind of the Christian movement?
Whew. Yeah, man. This talking about progressive Christianity is kind of like where Joel Berry loses his sense of humor,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
get very,
Sorry,
very
I
serious.
yeah.
No, no, that's fine. I think it's. I mean, it is. I think what really, causes that anger and indignation to kind of rise up, in me is seeing, um uh, I don't know, like seeing like evil called good, good called evil, seeing evil things being done, in the name of Christ, in a church, when you see a drag queen dancing for kids in on the altar of a church, and you see, the cross, uh, on the wall behind this person as they're doing what they're doing. There's something that really really infuriates me about that, and I think, um, it frustrates me too to see Christians missing the plot of why we're here,
Yeah.
um, what we're supposed to be doing, and it's it's nothing I'm not familiar with. I mean, I think Christians, since I can remember, since I was a kid, Christians have struggled with like their place in the world, and balancing, like, we want to be winsome and we want to reach people and we want to look appealing to people, so that we can bring them in, so that we can, preach the good news of Jesus, and win them over and all this stuff. And I think, like anything, like the silly human beings that we are, we're good at putting the cart before the horse, and kind of making the attractional thing, that whatever we might be doing, kind of the main thing, that like we see ourselves as God's PR reps, that like our whole job is to um, make God look really good to the world, by all these great things that we're doing, or the way that we kind of conform to the cultural zeitgeist. Um, and people people with good motives, people who genuinely feel they love Jesus and want to do the right thing, you know, who get captured by this ideology, and them end up defending the most unspeakably evil things, um, because they've put the cart before the horse, and it's just frustrating to see. I think, Phil Vischer. I have to mute Phil Vischer sometimes, because I just like I'm going to lose my whole day if I am
Yeah.
responding to his tweets. You know, I grew up watching VeggieTales. It's like
Yeah.
I was a
Same. Yeah.
VeggieTales kid. Um, and I obviously don't judge Phil Vischer. I'm not in like the Phil Vischer is an apostate camp or anything like that. I don't think we should so readily judge someone's hearts or their position before God. I think we're going to agree about how to deal with things politically, and that's okay. But it is. I think it's frustrating to see, like, in this current cultural moment, um, when all of the last 2,000 years of acquired wisdom, um, and guidance from philosophers and church fathers, and the scripture itself, it's being completely thrown out. And we're watching a culture floundering, trying to build a new cohesive worldview that doesn't work. And the most tragic thing you see as a result of that is the kids that suffer as a result.
Mm.
The young men who are lost and nihilistic, and the kids who are gender confused, and the girls who have body image issues and who don't understand their worth. And meanwhile, you have these Christians trying to, like, kowtow to this movement. It's absolutely infuriating. It's not what we're supposed to be. Salt and light. We're supposed to present a contrast, like, to this dark world that is ensnaring so many people in lies and darkness. We're supposed to be that light, like, on the other side, like, hey guys, over here, like, come over here. This is better. Jesus is better. Um, Yet we want to please the darkness. And it's yeah, that's why Joel Berry loses his sense of humor.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand that, because it's one of those things where I think in a lot of ways, and I won't be the first person to say this, but I think, progressivism is kind of a Christian heresy, right? It takes a lot of the truths in Christianity, a lot of the things that we're commanded to do, caring about people and meeting them where they're at, and trying to, and it hacks that system, right? It
Yeah.
it strips away the importance of Christ, and the importance of God's word, and the importance of the moral leadership that those things bring, and it only focuses on the parts where you're accepting, and you're and
Hmm.
it warps the idea of loving someone into this new ideology. And I think that's why Christianity is people who have received a gospel that is very much focused entirely on the love and acceptance part of Christianity, and never on the, like, but also Christianity loves you by providing standards and guidance in your
Right.
life that make things and protect your family and allow you to flourish.
Right.
People who haven't gotten that side of the story, they become very easy prey for an
Yeah.
ideology that tells them, oh, well, this is about love and God is about love, and so therefore these are the same thing, right? It's so easy to conflate when you've completely removed the actual message of Christ from from kind of the
Hmm.
general idea of the gospel.
Yeah, and I think too that, at least in my observation, you know, we know how dangerous and damaging progressivism can be. I think when you marry that with this religious fervor, with people who genuinely believe that these progressive ideas are from God and God wants me to do this, I think it makes it like 3 times more dangerous. You know, when you have this religious zeal combined with very very anti-human ideas that destroy the human individual, that destroy the soul. I think that kind of tends to make me want to really focus my attention on that wing of the Progressive Party, because I do think that they're going to be the ones who are most passionate, and the most dedicated to that ideology, the most unwilling to hear reason, because they have that religious fervor attached to it. And so that's one thing that we gotta
Yeah,
we
bring it
gotta
back to the comedy here.
yeah. No, that's fine. We can talk about whatever.
No. Well, yeah. I was going to say, like, this does bring you back to the comedy angle, though, because I think something really important that you said there was the truth, like truths about humanity, right? Like the Bible and and Christianity, the gospel, they do tell us about what we should be and what God wants us to be, but it also doesn't ignore the truths about humanity, right? The thing
Yeah.
that makes Christianity so powerful is that it reveals and says things about humanity that I don't think any other religion truly says, right? It reveals things about the human nature, and it takes those things into account when it's then making us whole and bringing us closer to God. And I think that the progressive worldview is in many ways the complete denial of these things. Well, ironically, while encouraging people to indulge in the darkest parts of human nature,
Yeah.
it denies so much about human nature. And that's where the comedy can come back in again, just saying obvious things that are forbidden, but because you get to say them under the understanding of comedy and you're making people laugh while you're saying them, you can kind of rip away all these many layers that have been put between the truth and people and the understanding of who humans are.
Well, yeah, that's the core of this whole thing, is that I think this is fundamentally a contest between people who say, I am who God says I am, and people who say, I am who I say who I am. Essentially, like I will be like God, and we've heard that before. That goes all the way back to Lucifer and the fallen angels. I will be like the Most High. Like, this is the oldest conflict. I mean, this is the conflict. The central conflict of human existence is this question: who defines who I am? Mm-hmm. And I think, like you mentioned with the comedy, there is something inherently very funny about this little tiny, carbon-based life form on the shore of a vast ocean, standing before his creator saying, I am God, I am God. I think so much of the Babylon Bees comedy kind of has that common thread in it, that we're laughing at this situation of these people who have decided that their own definition of who they are and who other people are is the final word. It's my truth. You can't deny my truth. And it's if it wasn't for the horrible damage it does to so many lives, it would be all comedy. But you kind of have to take the comedy with the tragedy a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You don't think of Job as a funny book of the Bible, but that revelation of like you screaming at the guy who set the cornerstone of the universe, and saying, "No, I demand that reality conforms around me." There is truly nothing more absurd, which is why, as progressivism advances, it can only become more and more absurd. This is why clown world is a real thing, right? Because that's the only trajectory, is clown world. When your entire system is about inverting natural hierarchies and lying about the way the world should be ordered, the only direction you can move is more and more clownish and absurd directions.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And that's what makes our job so hard, is just keeping up with all the, like, what was it? What was it? Last week, the big headline from the Washington Post was like that Shark Week was overrepresenting white men named Mike or something. I'm like, what What am I supposed to do with that at the Babylon Bee? Like this, I think this morning or yesterday, there was another headline about how warning that if you're not vaccinated, you're more likely to get into a car accident. Again, like the comedy writes itself, and sometimes you just got to throw up your hands and be like, no clue what to do with this.
Yeah, one of the most common responses I saw with that Shark Week article was specifically, "Well, the Babylon Bee is over. Like they like the real news. Like we've hit that event horizon where the real news
Yeah.
is the Babylon Bee. There is no separation. The WAPO just is the Babylon Bee front page now. And so
Yeah.
how are they going to do any of this?
How much more absurd can we get, right? I mean, it has to end somewhere. Like that's what I always ask myself. Like, okay, the progressive march, it's got to keep progressing. It's got to get more absurd, like you said. Like theoretically, there's no end point to that. So, like, at what point does it just become impossible to do comedy because it's just like it's completely indistinguishable from the real world? Or do we swing back, which I think is probably quite likely? We swing back to this more, maybe respectful, religious, almost Victorian era, and the Babylon Bee then has to poke fun at the right again. I don't know.
No, I mean, if only we could have that problem. Let
if
us
only.
let us desperately hope for the reality in which that is the bee's job. I had a thread there and I just dropped it. I was going to talk about, we were talking about Progressive's ridiculous clown world. There was something about that
absurdity,
that I wanted to grab.
catching up with reality.
Yeah. I mean, what did I lose there? I don't know. I'm not going to be able to share it. I'll kick myself later. I'll be like, I knew it. This was a great question, but
that's all right. We'll do a bonus episode.
Exactly. Yeah. We'll do this again to make sure that we get to that one. It does become kind of insane when you're ruling class. Like I'm sure you saw the sadly, I wish we could all scour it from our minds, but the military, the different people throughout the military wearing like the animal heads, like having all the different like animal fetish heads and stuff like that. Like as you have people inserting that kind of thing like into the leadership of your country and then demanding people take it seriously, like demanding that like people with a very straight face trying to lecture you like it's John Lithgow from Footloose, like, no, you must believe that these people are the most competent people to have ever existed and you live in the most progressive and tolerant society. What do you think about that inversion of people who look at the world around them and they truly buy into the idea that kind of the current cultural zeitgeist is the most sophisticated and the most advanced and the most progressive world to ever exist, while also trying to kind of put this kind of hold this kind of stuff up as something that should be emulated? Like how do you get there? How do they make that connection?
I feel like in some ways the advent of Darwinism kind of hurt us quite a bit here, because I think what it injected into our cultural understanding is this idea that human beings are always, we're on this line, we're always evolving, and getting better, it's survival of the fittest. And in the same way, ideas and philosophies are survival of the fittest, where theoretically the best idea wins, and we're just kind of on this straight slope, this upward trajectory towards kind of this distant utopia. You when you listen to people like Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of depart from his scientific expertise and talk about philosophy and sociology and anthropology, he kind of has that bias that we had we were cavemen, and then there was the dark ages when people believed in religion, and now we're kind of growing beyond that to this new higher thing. And I think what people need to understand is that there's nothing new under the sun, and that human beings aren't quite on a upward trajectory as continually playing out a cycle. I think that we go through cycles. There's rises, there's falls. Good philosophies and bad philosophies come and go, and when you step back and look at it all, we're just kind of inventing new ways to to sin and to um, to go the wrong way, essentially. But this new progressivism, this new woke worldview is nothing new. I mean,
That's right.
we're going back to before Christ paganism, essentially. Um, I mean, everything that we're doing right now is has been done 1,000 times before, and it'll be done again. And I think people need to understand that yeah, we're progressivism is not progressing forward. It's going backwards. It's taken us to a very dark place in the distant past that we spent 2,000 years crawling out of, thanks to, Socrates and Jesus and everything that came after them. And it's going nowhere good if it continues on its present course.
Yeah, in my corner of the internet, we call this Whig history. That idea that we're constantly moving in the progressive direction.
Yeah.
There's always some new hill to climb. There's humanity is always becoming better, and it's always the next thing. This idea of infinite progress is something
Hmm.
that I think is really at the core of the religion that you're talking about,
Yeah.
because what it does is it allows for the infinite revolution, right? Like, you're never at the point where like society's institutions are good, and the minor improvements could be made, things can be better, but you're always under the impression that if we would just dismantle the things that are in society now, then we can rebuild them in our own image. And again, this is always the satanic promise that you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
you could remake the world. Like, you look at the world as it is, you could make it in your own image. Maybe that's what binds both, the kind of the general progressive worldview, and then obviously like the certain parts of Christianity that goes direction. It's
Yeah.
immunizing the eschaton, right? Is like
Hmm.
they're ignoring the idea that you can't actually bring about the perfection in the world, and so they
Yeah.
push beyond the ability of mankind and dismantle things that should be dismantled, thinking that at the end of the day, whether through a Christian worldview or another one, that they can bring about kind of that perfect utopia.
Yeah. Well, I always say that ever since the Tower of Babel, we've been trying to rebuild it.
Yeah,
It
that's right.
just takes one form or another. Um, and it is interesting to think of what role technology will play, in the future, as we have, blockchain and this culture, this revolution in communications with the internet. Um, what does that kind of utopian vision look like with all this technology? And you kind of get a taste for it with some of these, World Economic Forum guys, these people who kind of want to tinker with the human race and achieve this higher state. It's just, I don't know. I mean, if you know history, it is so laughable if it weren't frightening.
Yeah, if it did have such a horrific track record at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, oh, that brings me back. Thank you. I think you
Yeah.
reminded me of one of the threads I wanted to get to. So technology, right? Like, one of the things that I think has made you guys so successful is part of what technology has done is they've turned the progressive religion into something that must be performed out loud online, right? It's
Mm.
not just enough to keep your head down and stay quiet. If you don't post something, if you don't post the square, if you don't post the flag, if you don't
Yeah.
change your corporation's logo to the pride colors, then the absence of that performance in public is the real issue, right? It's not enough to just not say the wrong thing. You have to say the right thing in public for everyone to see. And social
Uh-huh.
media creates the kind of this accountability, where like everyone can look and check your profile and see if you've done the thing. And I think that's what you got. One of those things you guys are really good at mocking is like the
Hmm.
performative aspect of the social media experience that progressivism forces people to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been a ripe source of comedy for us I mean, from, like you said, from the BLM stuff to, the LGBT movement to Ukraine. I mean, it's the meme, the current thing. The
Yeah.
Babylon Bee has been making fun of the current thing since we began. Um, and it is funny how technology does it. I mean, it's almost impossible to escape from anymore. I mean, these phones are in our pocket now. Um, and yet that same technology is kind of what gave rise to the Babylon Bee, that we were able to, reach this audience that wasn't being reached, um, by through traditional media outlets. And so for that, we're thankful. I think at the same time, um, these social media companies have wised up to the fact that our platform was getting a little bigger than they were comfortable with. So that's when you see the shadow banning with Twitter. Facebook's even worse than Twitter. I mean, Facebook's just a disaster. We after I think in October, before the 2022 election, Trump shared a Babylon Bee article on Twitter, and within a week, our engagement on Facebook was just gone, and it hasn't recovered since. It's just like someone pressed a button and it was gone. So that's, while the internet does have this incredible power to, like what you do, you can reach this audience that you would never otherwise be able to reach. There is that sense to where when you start kind of consolidating all that power in the hands of one or two companies, you get to the point where someone can just click a button and erase someone from the face of the earth completely, and so I think that's one thing that conservatives really need to start very intentionally, uh, f- you know, fighting against is the consolidation of communications and internet power in the hands of 3 or 4 or 5 companies that are all in ideological lockstep. I mean, these companies need to be broken up, and that goes against so many of our our Reagan-esque conservative instincts. But I think we need to think about the spirit of free speech, moving forward, as opposed to kind of this bias that we have that private companies are not to be touched. And as we know now, they're not private companies; they're partnered with the government anyway. So they're acting as de facto government enforcers. And we're seeing that with Twitter, with the Twitter dumps that Elon is putting out there. God bless him. But if Twitter's doing it, we know that Facebook is also doing it. So is Google, which is even more dangerous because Google controls the ability to search the entire internet, basically. So Twitter's just the first step. I think we need to really keep banging this drum that these companies need to be broken up, and there needs to be some transparency and accountability.
Yeah, I mean, if I have I have a couple projects, but one of the main ones is just taking an absolute hammer to, like you said, this Reagan-esque idea that, like, yeah, no, we're the small government guys. Government can't get involved. Like, no, I want to see this trust busted, baby. Like, I want to see Teddy Roosevelt ride in on a bear or something, and just destroy these people. Like, absolutely not. No, like you said, these are not private companies. Even if you hold to that ideology, which I don't, these things aren't even close. Like, these things are arms of the government to the point where we have the communications between the people who manage the information on the site having the direct meetings, like bragging about their FBI meetings. Like, this isn't even close to being some kind of independent corporation just doing its thing outside the auspices of the government.
Yeah, and I think for so long we were so used to having this kind of this Judeo-Christian, somewhat moral culture, this cultural consensus where, I think a lot of us had this idea that, if a company does the right thing, if they do the moral thing, they will be successful, or almost even, you could even go like the Ayn Randiism, that this idea that, that you act in self-interest, and that's gonna translate into kind of the good of everybody. It's going to automatically translate into human flourishing. And I think we were taking a lot for granted there in this amazing Christian culture that we had. And that consensus is no longer there. I mean, you if you own a tech company, you can become a lot more successful and make a lot more money if you placate to the tyrannical regime of China, or any number of these foreign governments. You can be a lot more successful oftentimes if you do the wrong thing. And so, yeah, I think we need to be very skeptical as conservatives going forward of any kind of power center, whether it is the government or corporations. And that's something that it's so funny. You look at, like, if you watch Blade Runner, they painted this, liberals in the 80s were terrified of corporations. They were all warning people about how corporations were going to take over the world someday. And you see in Blade Runner, you have these big, powerful, corporate governments ruling the world. and so and here it's finally coming to pass, and the left has stopped talking about it because these corporations happen to be on their side ideologically. So
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yeah, this is never a principle of theirs. It was a tool of power. When they
Yeah.
thought these people were, when they thought comedy was good at dismantling the Christians they didn't like, they utilized it. And when they thought corporations were keeping the Christian worldview, which they weren't, but when they thought they were keeping that kind of thing in place, they were against them. And now that the corporations are keeping their
Yes.
worldview in place and comedy is a threat to them, they've completely reversed their positions on these things. But I do think it is a catch 22, right? Because in one way it is essential to break up, like you said, the ownership of these companies, right? It is essential to do that. But of course, the only thing that can destroy a power of that size is another power of that size, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you're really stuck with. Because I think one thing that we kind of have to be honest about with the internet is, it starts with this really disassembled thing, right? And then kind of AOL dumbs it down, simplifies it, pipes it, lines it into like every home. And
Hmm.
AOL is the internet, right? Like people don't even understand the internet. They just click on AOL and that is the internet.
Right.
And then eventually like it shatters again. AOL falls apart and the other services are open and people go everywhere on the internet. But now we're back in that phase where like the internet is just Facebook, right? Like
Yeah.
and Instagram. Like people don't even, companies don't even have websites. They just set up a Facebook and that is their website because so many people
Hmm.
go there and use that as a proxy. That so there it's almost like there's something about and I do quite a few videos on this kind of thing, so I have more than a passing
Yeah.
theory about this. But
Yeah.
there's a force that makes us do this, right? Centralize things.
Mm.
Power always wants to consolidate. It always wants to be focused. It always wants to break down competition. And by the way, it's
Yeah.
not just power. Humans react to that. Humans prefer that. And so
Mm.
we're in this really difficult situation where in many ways, like I would agree with you, like we want to shatter this power and throw it, to the four winds.
Yeah.
But if we don't have the power to do that, if you don't have it to wield against those kind of things, then it
Yeah.
just kind of reforms in another way, right?
So what do you think the answer is there? You,
That's something I struggle with. Yeah, it could
yeah.
be because the obvious answer is then you've got to have control of the Leviathan, right?
Yeah.
If Leviathan is the natural order of kind of the thing, then the only thing left is having control of it. But I think, as you were talking about, history is cyclical, right? And
Hmm.
it's not a straight line of progress. And I think one thing that happens is the Tower of Babel gets rebuilt over and over again, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And so power centralizes, it becomes too much, it falls under its own hubris, it shatters entirely, and then the process starts again over and over
Yeah.
and over again. So I don't know if there's so much a solution as there is a realization of kind of an inescapable cycle of kind of
Mm.
human nature that will kind of
Yeah.
always lead us to kind of this conclusion.
I think there's something to that. That's kind of how I see it. I listen to Andrew Clavin, and
Mhm.
he says something that I really like, talking about having a tragic view of life, a healthy tragic view of life. I think acknowledging that that maybe we are a part of this cycle that is way outside of our control, and maybe things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. And maybe that's just the state of things. That's how things go. And like kind of the sooner that you can come to, you know, make peace with that, the better. And then you can act in the world and try to make the world better in your own little way. But you don't have to have this outsized idea that it's dependent on me to save
Yeah.
the world, turn it around. You can kind of like leave the rest to God. And I think there's like the Babylon Bee. I mean, our very name as a satire site, it's a reference to the Babylonian captivity when the empire of Nebuchadnezzar came in, took Israel away, ransacked the temple, and they were all slaves of this other empire. And imagine being someone living in Israel at that time, when it seems like this kingdom that God has established is all coming to ruin, and it's all over, right? Um, you know, but then like we have the advantage of looking back at that story thousands of years later, and we have the perspective. We see that the Babylonian Empire fell, the Medes and the Persians came along after it, and they fell too, and that's just what happens continually, and all we're exiles too a little bit as conservatives, as Christians, as people who are devoted to the truth in this culture. We are kind of outsiders. We're exiles in our own land, and I think it does bring a certain amount of peace to remember that. It's not on us to necessarily change the cycle of empires and the cycle of culture. Um, it's on us to just be faithful where God has placed us, to speak the truth in whatever way He's equipped us, and then leave the big picture stuff to Him. And so,
Yeah.
it could have very easily turned, gone the other way with the Babylon Bee. On Twitter, we could have been permanently banned and faded into obscurity, and then 2 years from now you never hear of us again, and we're all back getting jobs in supply chain management again. But that's not how it turned out in this case. I mean, go figure. All we have to worry about, as far as I'm concerned, is just every day, how am I going to speak the truth? How am I going to do it as lovingly as I can, and leave the big picture stuff to Him.
Because sometimes the world's richest man will come around and just smash your enemies for you, right?
Yeah, I was
it's
on the news the other day, and they were like, what's your advice for people who are facing censorship and things like that? And I was like, well, you just have to know a billionaire. I don't know what to tell you.
Just be friends with billionaires. That's
just
obvious.
be friends with Elon Musk.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's entirely reasonable. No, I like what you said there though, because I get accused of a black pilling every once in a while, like all the time actually. And what I try to explain to people is like, that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, as someone who like went through like a pretty deep tragedy at one point in my life, like one of the things that you have to come to grips with God is like, you truly are not in control. Like, that in theory, right? Like, you're told to like rest in God and trust and those kind of things, and understand at the end of the day that this is not all about you, and you're not the main character, and all those kind of things. But it's another thing to truly touch it in a way that like you have no other option. Like, okay, this is completely out of my hands, and there is nothing I can do except trust this. And I think people need to learn that lesson, while also understanding that doesn't mean that like you get out of doing hard things, right? Like nothing in the Bible promises you a life of sorry, Joel Osteen's wrong, guys. Like you're gonna have to, you're not gonna necessarily have a great life. Like, life could be hard, life could be suffering, and that doesn't mean you get to check out, and that doesn't mean that you don't have honorable, important, heroic things to do, even if the times around you are difficult, even if you're in a moment of Babylonian captivity, even if you're in a moment of collapse. That doesn't, you don't get to throw away your responsibility to follow God and take care of the people around you and make a positive impact in your world. Even if you are in some ways bailing out a sinking ship at the moment, you don't get the option to just call it a day. Like, and there's I think people don't think enough about like the importance of, in those difficult times, that's when it is the most important to understand that God's going to take care of those things, and then you still got a job to do, and there's honor and duty and meaning in that.
Absolutely. I mean, we are going to give an account for how we spent our lives. God's not going to hold us accountable for whether or not we were able to change the world, but He will hold us accountable for for our unkindness toward our neighbor. He's going to hold us accountable for that time when He was maybe prompting us to be bold and speak the truth, and we shrunk away. I think the one thing that I always, the most unconvincing argument for atheism that I hear all the time is that, atheists, we live more full, meaningful lives because we know that this is all there is, and we're not living for some kind of afterlife, so our lives are so much more meaningful because we're living for now, we're living for today. And it's like, well, I don't see how that's much different from Christianity. I think, a Christian who is honoring God should be living every day to the fullest, because that's the right thing to do. And I think we can do it in joy because I think we know the ultimate. We know where this ends ultimately, and where it ultimately ends is that we win.
Hmm.
The Bible says that every knee will bow, every tongue will confess someday, at some point, our King will set up his earthly kingdom and he will rule, and we won't have to worry about any of this stuff. And so I think that also kind of brings a sense of peace as things are crumbling and governments and elites and leaders are failing. We can kind of have that long-term vision of, okay, we know how this is going to end. I'm going to worry about today and do what I can for others and do what I can for God. And it's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
this life is great and there's so much to laugh at. There's so much to enjoy. There's no reason why we as conservatives, culture warriors, people who are devoted to the truth, there's no reason why we shouldn't be having a blast doing this, because it is so fun. It's so fun to be on the side of truth. It's so fun to watch liars squirm. It's just great. Life is a gift. So, I don't know. I think that if we all as people on this side of the aisle, so to speak, can remember that eternal, that long-term perspective, we'll be a lot happier as warriors.
I think that's right. Well, Joe, we've hit an hour here, so I think we got a few super chats. Do you still have time to go over them with me?
Totally. Let's do it, man.
All right, great. All right, guys, if you have any questions for myself or Joel, you can just go ahead and throw them in there. We'll go ahead and go through what we've got now here. We've got Line Drinker for $9.99. Thank you very much, sir. There's a non-zero chance that Joel wrote a low-effort headline that ends up being the catalyst, which leads to us winning. Absolutely incredible. The domino meme is true.
That's so true. Well, I also think that the fact that joke wasn't like necessarily like the funniest thing I've ever written is God's way of reminding me that, like, this is not you. Like, you have nothing to boast about. This is my work. So get over yourself.
And that's such a true statement. Like, you'll put together these like really high effort, threads or videos or jokes or whatever, and then like they don't go anywhere. And then you just throw out that thing that like, whatever, and then it explodes. And then you remember like, oh yeah, I'm not really doing this. This isn't. Yeah, it's nice that that he brought me along for the ride here at any point. But
that's
yeah,
right.
this is not all me. Yeah, that's absolutely how social media works here. Let's see. Got Creeper Weirdo here for $5. Excellent name, sir. Well done. Why don't people in our circles talk about AI art more? It's basically peak modernity and it's cyberpunk and creepy as hell, but my product button. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, AI art has been producing all kinds of, sometimes you see, oh, sorry, something exploded. Sometimes you see these things and they're kind of like nightmare fuel, like they're just absolutely terrifying.
They're getting better.
They are getting better. They are getting
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I've been thinking about that because I don't know what I don't like when I don't know what I think about something. I have to know my thoughts on something, and it's AI is so new and so weird. I struggle with it. I mean, so this new AI chatbot thing that people are playing with.
Yeah.
You can go. I mean, tell it to write a Babylon Bee article or a Babylon Bee headline. Like, go say write a Babylon Bee headline about how dumb AOC is, and it'll give you like spit out 10 headlines that actually aren't half bad. Like, they're not quite there, but they're almost there. I feel like in 5 years I'm going to be out of a job. Like,
Yeah.
writing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, in the art too is, I mean, are we going to get to this point where creative endeavors, writing, things like that, done by AI is indistinguishable from something that a human being might write? I don't know. I don't think we'll ever achieve pure AI. I think that's kind of based on a fallacy. This idea that our consciousness is nothing but meat and chemicals in our skulls. I think that we're soul and spirit, and so that human consciousness will never be able to fully reproduce that in a computer, in my opinion. But it's amazing to see how convincing some of this AI work is.
What do you think about? So this is something that, yeah, someone's putting Butlerian jihad in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, 100%, man. Like yeah, let's scour this from the earth. But what do you think
Yeah.
about this idea? Because I've entertained this before. We have these stories. It seems like something we can't escape, especially in obviously sci-fi, where like at some point, the robots take over and they destroy us. Like we make something that's too human. This is the story of Frankenstein at the end, right? Like
Hmm.
we make something that's too human and eventually comes back and destroys its creator. It feels like an echo, of course, of a biblical, right, storyline, right? Like we're like in many ways humans constantly trying to overtake God and then trying to
Yeah.
destroy God, and then we're terrified of something we create doing that to ourselves. But at the
Yeah.
same time, even though this is a constant recurring fear in our own fiction, we can't seem to stop ourselves, right? Like even though like every single story we can think of is about this like terrifying prospect, we still won't stop moving towards creating this kind of AI. What do you think that is?
Ooh. Yeah. It's kind of like that. It's that irrepressible drive that we have to
Yeah.
create and discover and do new things. I mean, that's funny that you talk about this idea of it almost reflecting an almost biblical story. I've thought a lot about, you read the book of Revelation and it talks about the Antichrist, and like what if the Antichrist is going to be an AI? What if it's some kind of like like a mockery of human life that is, made by human hands, that we kind of set up as, can you not imagine like the elites of the world creating an AI and saying, okay, like this is our God now. Like this is the most intelligent entity that's ever existed. It theoretically is going to spit out all the right answers. So we're going to abandon our governments and and serve this AI. I can see that happen. I can see like a Klaus Schwab doing something like that.
Yeah, no, it is it a very terrifying there's a very real sense in which AI might be a demon from the future, but that's another like
Ooh,
I don't want to
we
get
need
too
to
esoteric
we need
here.
to dedicate a whole podcast to AI. I
To
think that would be fun.
AI and whether or not it's
I
but yeah,
saw.
no.
I shared a video a few days ago. From it was a pitch meeting from Studio Ghibli. Hayazaki, the famous animator who's dead now, the Japanese animator. He made some of those amazing hand drawn films like Spirited Away and Ponyo. I can't think of who other ones at the top of my head, but he was some people were in his office pitching him this AI animation that would use machine learning and eventually kind of mimic the way human beings move. But as it starts out, it's kind of like this corpse like shuffling along the ground in this really quick, creepy way, and it just takes time for it to start kind of learning how to move. And Hayazaki's watching this, and he's like, "This is a mockery of life. Why would you even create this?" And then
Hmm.
he shakes his head and he's like, "I think we're in the end times." And so there's something about it that just doesn't bode well to me when I see it.
Yeah, and Jay-Ins here knows where my brain is going. Nick Land intensifies. Yeah, that's what I was chasing down. At some point, I'll have to see if I can coax Nick Land on here so he can embarrass
Yeah.
me. But way smarter than I am. But we might have to make that happen. All right, guys. Well, I think we got through all the super chats here. Let me just double check. While we're doing that, Jay or Joel, where should people look? Is there anything coming up? I know you've got a book or two or more.
Yeah.
What should people look at from you?
Yeah. So our latest book is The Babylon Bee Guide to Democracy. It's kind of our little silly civics course for how American government works. It's a funny picture book, kind of a toilet reader. You can open it up to any page, and there's going to be something funny on there. It's on sale now. I highly recommend picking that up. And then, you obviously you can find us at thebabylonbee.com. And you're going to see a lot of satire there that you won't see on social media if you just typically follow us on Twitter or elsewhere. There's a lot that we post on the site that you won't see. And we always appreciate your support. So, I mean, our engagement has been suppressed by social media quite a bit. We're primarily subscriber supported now, so encourage you to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, and we're just going to keep doing what we do.
Yeah, guys. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone here knows about the Babylon Bee. Everyone I know is subscribed. But if somehow you aren't, make sure that you're plugging into all those different options. And then, if it's your first time here, of course, you go ahead and subscribe. If you are watching online, but you want to do the podcast thing, the Blaze is moving everything from here on over the podcast platform. So, got the Auron MacIntyre show on all the major podcast platforms. So if you do subscribe over places like Apple, please make sure to go ahead and give like that rate and that review. That really helps a lot. It was already moving up into like the 70s or something. Just even they hadn't even done anything with it yet. So really exciting to see you guys. Keep going over there, subscribing, everything. Really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming by. Had a lot of interesting questions. Appreciate that, guys. I think I hit everything else. All right, we're good. All right, well, thank you once again, Joel. And as always, everybody, we'll talk to you next time.